I never even tried for a military academy. How difficult was it to get in?
I mean, honestly, this is like forever ago. I remember it being a hassle for sure. There was a lot of hoops to jump through. It's the great thing about the academies, and I think the hard thing about particularly applying to the academies, is that it's not just academics that they're concerned about. You got to do the academic piece
because you got to play 2 sports, right?
You got to play sports. You got to do the extracurriculars. You got to do student government and stuff like that. I wouldn't say you need to, but pretty much everybody that's there, it's competitive enough to get in that folks really have to do kind of all of it. You got to play sports. You got to do the extracurricular stuff. You got to be, great in the classroom, all those things. Mm-hmm. And I was very lucky to be recruited to be an athlete there. So
you got recruited?
Yeah. So,
okay.
So essentially I had always, I had it on my radar from a young age because my great grandfather was a bombardier in the Army, and really sort of kind of on family trips up to that area, that part of the country where my family is from. Mm-hmm. We'd pass through Annapolis, and my great grandmother and my great grandfather would be like, "Hey, look at this place."
Really romanticize it, right?
Yeah, really. They helped me to understand, that it was a pretty big deal, and they just put it in my head at a very early age, and the good news for me is when it came time for me to be kind of looking at schools, I was lucky to be recruited on the athletic side, which put it like front of the line. And essentially, I had some other opportunities on that front, but I told my mother, in that time frame, I was like, "Hey, look, if I really don't like it, I'll leave and go to one of these other schools. I'll go to a state school or, one of these normal schools, sure, play sports and call it a day." And, of course you get there, it's a military school. They shave your head. They break you down.
You get no privileges, right? At the beginning, no car, no TV, right?
Yeah. Your first year, you're pretty, they got you on lockdown for sure. So
see, I remember seeing that, cause I grew up really into computers and video games, to a terrible extent. I was a very good athlete. I played college baseball, but I was D2. But I was very hooked on electronics, and I remember seeing that and being like, I don't know if I want
to. Honestly, it's a great, I don't want to call it a hazing package, but it is it breaks you down pretty good, and really, if for nothing else, it puts everybody on the same playing field where we all have gone through, something that's uncomfortable and not necessarily super easy and really not pleasant.
Sure.
And so it has made it so I look back on that, and I was at a wedding a couple weeks ago with all of my best buddies from the Naval Academy, and it just occurred to me when I was at that wedding, looking around at all these guys, we've all known each other since we were 18 years old, and we have a really deep bond. And again, it's not all of us were did horrendously hard things, but we all just were uncomfortable at a formative time in life. So when you're 18 years old and all your buddies from high school are at, you name the state school, they're partying, they're in a frat, they're having a great time. And you and your buddies, and you and your buddies are are locked down. The only time you're allowed off the base is, Saturday from 10 a.m. to 9 p.m.
They refer to Annapolis, the academy, as the base.
They call it the yard.
The yard.
The yard.
That doesn't make it sound better.
Yeah, I know, right? So you're pretty much locked in, and no civilian clothes, no drinking, no fun of any kind shall be had. But
man, you almost need that though, because I remember you're 18 in high school and you feel like big the big dog on campus, and then you go to college and you're a child. I even look at people fresh out of college and I'm like, you're such an infant,
totally
no experience, and you still need oversight. So it honestly, makes sense.
It was a fantastic, when I was in high school and I was looking at it, no kidding. I remember my mom at some point was like, what is wrong? Why would you want to do this? This sounds objectively horrendous. All your friends are going to go have a fun, formative time in life, and it's going to be a heap of fun. You are choosing to have a tough time. Why are you doing that? And I was like, hey man, you're going to have to put the work in one way or the other. I would like to start putting the work in now, such that,
man, that's such a mature 18-year-old.
I mean, honestly, I was plenty immature, but for whatever reason, that was like, I'm very lucky that was my thought process. Like, delayed gratification. Let's start putting the work in now. And yeah, I mean, I'm very glad I did it. My 4 years there were rough. I did not, aside from making incredible friends and lifelong friendships, I had a tough time. Like, academically, I had a tough time. Just like you said, I went from being, one of the top whatever people in high school. I was like pretty good at sports. I was pretty good in the classroom. And it was all pretty straightforward, to, man, people are like really good at sports here, and man, people are super
you're
smart.
D1.
Yeah, people are super smart here. Yeah. And so I was like, man, this is like really tough. And so not
only
I was very
that
happy
too,
to like learn all that early, to learn that it takes hard work and to be uncomfortable and to push hard and to do all those things.
But you never see, like, when people don't realize, you look at U.S. News World Rankings on universities and stuff, you don't see the academies on there. And like, right?
They're always like in like a special section. They're always like in the federally subsidized, liberal arts, whatever,
but
schools.
The academics there are like extremely challenging. Like,
yeah. And I can say subjectively for myself, yep,
yeah,
sure. And it also doesn't help that, I was a history major at the academy.
Really?
But everybody there has,
doesn't everybody study
STEM,
history there?
It's a STEM curriculum. So it is like, I have a BS. I have a Bachelor of Science in history, which is like not a thing. I don't know what schools have that, but it's like Navy, Army, and maybe Air Force. And so the bottom line is, even as a history major, it was, you have to take all the math, thermodynamics, a couple semesters of electrical engineering, physics, chemistry, all these classes that are like systems engineering, all these classes that are particularly if you are not naturally inclined to think that way or take those type of classes, it's tough. So for somebody like me, it was particularly, I think, I'm guessing I would have done better if I would have gone to, you name the school, where I could have been a history major and essentially focused on the things I was good at. But
and then what do you do with it?
Exactly. And then the point is that, like, the great news is I learned sort of the hard way how to study, how to make sure that I budgeted my time, how to look at a goal off in the distance and say, okay, how am I going to back plan my way into making sure that, this thermodynamics class over the semester goes well.
Aren't you glad you took those classes though?
Totally.
They're fun.
Totally.
I think people don't realize how fun that is. And I still listen and read physics for fun.
Well, that makes you a very special person.
I just think it's super interesting as far as like our whole lives. And I took, I was mechanical engineering first before I switched to biochemistry. So I had this whole array of engineering courses, and I still, like, I'll be sitting in a chair and still think about the applied forces against it, me sitting in it against the floor, pushing in. And it's just, I'm just a nerd that way. And I absolutely eat that stuff up. And I'm happy that my electives in undergrad were the physics and the engineering courses that I accidentally took because I switched majors.
Totally. I mean, honestly, it is incredibly interesting. And
what are you going to do with
it? Was hard to do. It was
gender study. Not to knock any of that stuff down, but we're talking about stuff that can be applied later in life. And that's the big problem with universities, is that they force you guys to take it at the military academies. So yes, okay, you want to be a history major. I know people that were history majors at the public universities. They did what you said. They only focused on history. None of them use a history degree.
It's, honestly, a broad education, I think, is, in my view, is an important thing. I mean, the whatever it is that you're doing should be a relatively broad thing.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, at least the way I view it, and I'm no expert here, but the way I view it is, college is a time to, in our sort of setup in our society, college is a time to really sort of dig in, learn some broad information, broad skill sets, et cetera, that you can apply for the rest of your life. So I would I'm not a believer in sort of like anchoring down and, at least for most folks, in anchoring down and like, learning, the Windows skill set. Learning Excel.
Really? Doesn't the whole military?
Learning like Windows, but
the military runs on that.
It does, but like it's a good stuff to know. But it's, I think, a liberal education across STEM, across social sciences, et cetera, is a great thing for an educated electorate. Like people should know a little bit about a lot of different things. And then obviously if you want to, anchor down in your career and really dig in on the finance side or the applied engineering side or whatever it is, then like really dig in there and maybe get a master's, maybe do a PhD, or just learn as you go. But what we don't want, and this is just me on a soapbox, we don't want a bunch of folks that see life through a soda straw of here's my experience of like, I'm a physics guy, I'm a physics person, and now I'm looking at the rest of the world through only that lens. Like, yes, be a physics person, but also know a little bit about history, also know a little bit about how the world works, and read some of the classics, do some of that stuff.
And that is super important that I had to learn on my own through listening to people. Like I listened to a podcast with Neil deGrasse Tyson, and he was talking about the importance of doing art to activate different parts of your brain, which allows you to think differently. Like, I'm a very logical thinker, but when you expand and fiction, like we were just downstairs in my house, we looked at the book Dune. There are things, there's a lot of clinical studies that prove that reading fiction activates your brain in a much different way than reading nonfiction, which allows this expanse of synapses that work differently when you go back to doing more logical things. So I 100% agree. And just before, we get in the woods, because I want this podcast, like this is the new format of the podcast, going to be interviewing people who are in the fitness world, who I think are just generally interesting. And we'll get into more like fitness focused stuff. So Chase is co-founder, right?
That's right.
Of VRB Labs, which is a veteran owned CBD company, which is kind of funny, and I've told you before, because the U.S. military is not allowed to take CBD, unfortunately, for a lot of people, because there's so many benefits that are being proven. So we'll get into that later on. I just want to, before we go too far in, exactly who you are. So going back to the way Annapolis functions, you got this amazing broad force study upon you. But how about, I run this fitness focused channel. How about the fitness? Don't the military academies, you got to play two sports, correct?
You have to play a sport. You've got to play. So there's like the varsity track, there's the club track, and then there's intramurals. So everybody at the very least has to do intramurals, which are, somewhat more intense than I think the run of the mill intramural sport world. And so that can be anything from like, hey, everybody at the academy boxes. You've got a box.
That's awesome.
For your first, I think 2 semesters, maybe. Everybody's got to take boxing. And then some folks,
you spar?
Yeah.
Really?
That's actually the test, the midterm and the test is sparring.
Well, people get knocked out.
Yeah. It's a whole thing, man.
Really?
Yeah. It's you could see when it's like sparring season, people are walking around the academy with, pretty banged up.
I mean,
black eyes, all of it.
I guess for people going in the military, you like, I've taken a punch. I've sparred in Muay Thai, not traditional boxing, Western boxing, and it's different,
Yeah.
What's that? Mike Tyson's got that plan. Everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the face.
It honestly, like, I'm not sure how long that'll stick around. Like now that we're learning all about, CTE concussions and all that stuff.
Yeah.
It is like a kind of a cool old tradition. But, regardless of whatever it is, even if it was like, if they replace that tradition with something like jujitsu or something
That's what I was about to ask.
Less impact, something like that. Either way, teaching folks to really do something like, if you're not a fighter, if you don't come from that background, man, it's a scary thing to walk in and know that you're about to get smoked right in the mouth by somebody that really actually probably wants to hurt you, because at the end of the day, it's you or them. I think it's a sort of a rite of passage, and teaches you a lot about yourself in a very quick